Create an equitable, clean energy future and advance your career. Apply now for the Financing and Deploying Clean Energy Certificate Program at Yale. Learn more and apply at cbey.yale.edu/certificate. That's cbey.yale.edu/certificate.
Before we start the show, we wanted to bring to the listeners' attention some charitable matching that we've been trying to do. We've mentioned it a couple past episodes. Nobody's taken us up on it, so we wanted to bring it up again. So the first relates to our water and agriculture episode. We talked about how Somalia is on track for a fifth failed rainy season. There's been repeated droughts driving people to these dozens of informal settlements. The World Health Organization says every single person in Somalia is facing hunger on a scale not seen since the famine in 2011, which killed more than 250,000 people, half of them children. For those wanting to help in this situation, one of the charities on the ground is the Somalia Humanitarian Fund. It's a UN country-based pooled fund. Contributions are collected into a single, unearmarked fund and managed locally under UN leadership. So the podcast, we're doing this matching challenge, right? So up to $250. If you'd like to donate, go to crisisrelief.un.org/Somalia. That's crisisrelief.un.org/Somalia. And then whatever you donate, email your receipt to us, hosts, HOSTS, at sustainabilitydefined.com, and we'll do the match until we hit the max of $250.
And before we're done here, another elbow definers if you want to donate to the Uproot Project. So we called for this a few episodes ago as well. Consider donating to Uproot Project. They are a newly launched network for journalists of color who cover environmental issues, as well as students and others aspiring to cover this beat. The Uproot Project will connect its member journalists with publications, offer training, and build community as they navigate the work ahead, reporting on the environmental crises of our time. Now, for the match, same thing that Scott just described. You can go to the Uproot Project at uprootproject.org. And again, send us your receipt for your donation to hosts at sustainabilitydefined.com, and the podcast will match up to the first $250 donated. Let's go.
All right, definers, welcome back to Sustainability Defined, where Jay and I are here defining sustainability one concept and one bad joke at a time. Jay, this is an important concept we're doing today. I'm surprised we haven't done it yet.
It's taken us, we've been doing this for 7 years somehow, and we haven't done biodiversity yet. What?
I know, but it's been in the news recently, so very timely, and we'll explain why in just a minute. So Jay, tell the listeners what we're going to hear in this introduction to our biodiversity episode.
Excellent. So we're going to cover the following things. What is biodiversity? Why is biodiversity important for humans and the planet? How has the level of biodiversity on our planet changed over time? And what's the trajectory into the future? What are the key drivers of biodiversity loss? Who is leading on this issue? What are notable policies or commitments around this issue that can help move the needle in a positive direction? What can listeners do to help improve biodiversity? And finally, we will connect with Paula Ehrlich, President and CEO of the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. So Scott, needless to say, a heck of a lineup coming up.
But you didn't say we're going to branch into anything.
Oh, goodness. All right, well, let's just branch into our first topic, shall we?
There you go.
What is biodiversity?
So, Jay, biodiversity is the word used to describe the variety of life on Earth at all levels. It encompasses every living thing, not just animals and plants, but also down to microorganisms like bacteria and fungi. And Jay, you know the joke?
I'm waiting for you to make it.
So a mushroom walks into a bar and the mushroom says, "I'll take your finest drink." And the bartender goes, "We don't serve your kind here." And the mushroom goes, "Why not? I'm a fun guy." You haven't heard that one?
Oh, of course I've heard it, but it's still
you still gave
hits
me a laugh.
every
Thank you. I'd like 90% of the definers are like groaning, but the 10% who haven't heard it are like, that's good stuff. All right.
The percentage might be even smaller than that, but I'm sure we're all better for having heard it.
There you go. So, all right. So some even too small to see with the naked eye. Everybody's included. So how varied is life on Earth right now? Well, according to National Geographic, scientists estimate there are over 8.7 million species of plants and animals that exist on the planet. However, only about 14% of those, or about 1.2 million, have been identified so far. Jay, that's crazy. We need to find some.
It's nuts. Crazy.
How about this? If I find one, I'll name it after you, and if you find one, you name it after me.
Oh, man. It's too bad dinosaurs are gone, because the first thing that popped to my mind, Scott, was a Breenosaurus.
Jay, it's a species pact. It's happening. Okay, it's agreed to.
Great.
So safe to say there's a lot more finding of species to do for you and I, Jay, but also all the definers. Also interesting to note here, the most diverse group of living organisms that have been found are insects. Over 900,000 of the 1.2 million species are insects.
Crazy. Mm-hmm. And really relaxing as you go to bed tonight, I'm sure. Okay. The variety of life on Earth is more pronounced in some areas of the world. These areas have been dubbed biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots make up about 2.3% of Earth's land surface, but 44% of the world's plants and 35% of land vertebrates live in these regions. There are over 30 recognized biodiversity hotspots in the world, including the Andes Mountains tropical hotspot and the New Zealand archipelago.
It sounds like also a way to choose your next vacation, perhaps. Of course, sustainable tourism, to the extent you can.
Right. And oh, Scott, what's our episode on that? Oh, man.
It's there. But go look for it. All right.
33, folks. Episode 33.
Oh, he looked it up. All right. In addition to these elevated levels of biodiversity, many of these hotspots are home to endemic species, which are species found in only one area, that area. Unfortunately, though, as some of the best sources of biodiversity and natural resources, these hotspots are often some of the most exploited ecosystems in the world. Ugh. All right, Jay, so why is biodiversity important for humans and the planet?
All right, so nature is a complex system, and as many scientists point out, biodiversity is critical to that system. Certain species rely on others for their survival. That means that if we take out one species, it could have a domino effect on other ones. We'll link in our intro notes to 2018 research from University of Exeter researchers that found that there is a higher risk of, quote, extinction cascades when other species are not present to fill the gap created by the loss of a single species.
Then there's the research released in December 2022, Jay, that used one of Europe's most powerful supercomputers to create synthetic Earths. This is so crazy. Complete with virtual species and more than 15,000 food webs to predict the interconnected fate of species that will likely disappear from the ravages of climate and land use changes. Jay, I feel like ESPN, like SportsCenter, they use supercomputers to predict how the football game is going to play out. This seems like a much better use of computer predictions.
Well, Scott, I'm embarrassed to say my first question is, are virtual dogs and cats as cute as real life dogs and cats?
They're cuter, Jay.
They're cuter?
They're cuter.
Oh, bad,
I know.
Bad news for Judy and Delta.
So the model incorporates the effects of cascading extinction and finds that Earth will lose some 10% of its animals and plants by 2050 and 27% by 2100. Not a good end to the game right now. This idea that taking out species can have a detrimental effect on the whole was represented powerfully at a recent United Nations meeting on biodiversity with a huge Jenga tower. So this UN meeting, we're going to talk about more of that in a little bit, but let's go back to the Jenga tower. So you can take out the pieces, right? And for a while, it remains standing. But scientists don't really understand which combination of blocks that get removed from that tower are going to totally destabilize it and make it collapse. What we do know is that the more we remove, the more unstable the tower becomes.
It's all about that flick, Scott. If you flick the piece and it moves a little, you're probably okay.
That's all we got. We just got to flick around and we'll figure this out.
Right.
Yeah.
It just sounds like we're running out of those pieces that flick easily and move out of position, you know. Okay. If biodiversity vanishes, in addition to the negative impacts on ecosystems, we might limit our own advancement. To illustrate this importance, let's think about the ways nature has helped humanity. For one, biodiversity underpins many things we rely on. Think little things like food, water, and oxygen. In fact, half of the world's GDP is dependent on natural resources. This means that about $44 trillion of economic value across the globe relies on nature and its interconnectedness.
Another $1 trillion topic, Jay, covered by Sustainability Defined.
Chalk it up. A big part of that economic value is driven by food production, and to do that, you need pollinators.
Unfortunately, one study showed that the relative abundance of 5 bumblebee species has declined by 96%. So these pollinators not doing so great. As a result, farmers have had to use domesticated bees, honeybees, to pollinate crops, and now even those bees are seeing huge losses in population numbers. One reason is due to neonicotinoid use. Check out episode number 3 for more information on that. Also notable with food production is we've homogenized our crops to be more efficient. But of course, with less diversity of crops, one disease can have a serious detrimental impact.
Say neonicotinoid 5 times fast.
That's why I said more information on that.
Yeah. Here's another potential benefit to humanity we could lose as we laugh our way through losing things that humanity has gained, right? There are likely potential treatments and technology that exist in nature that we have yet to discover. Currently, it is estimated that nature has inspired over 13,000 patented designs across various industries. Often, biologic and nature-inspired design is the basis of many new technological innovations. We cover this topic previously in episode 44 on biomimicry.
And the medical field specifically has benefited greatly from the variety of life on Earth. Biodiversity offers many prospective sources for new medicine development and treatments. Take aspirin, one of the most common drugs. It can be linked back to the use of the bark of willow trees for pain relief. Thousands of years ago, willow bark was used in traditional medicine, and in the 1800s, it was discovered that the bark produces the active ingredient salicin. This ingredient became the basis of the aspirin we use today to treat pain and even prevent strokes.
So, to conclude this section on the importance of biodiversity, we want to pass along something we heard on a recent New York Times The Daily podcast episode on biodiversity. In that episode, they said the climate scientist Katherine Hayhoe believes climate change presents a near-term threat to the future of human civilization, while the biodiversity crisis presents a longer-term threat to the viability of the human species. In other words, in a shorter term, climate change is a huge threat to order in the world and governments being able to function, while biodiversity in the longer term threatens our continued existence as a species. Really light reading here, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay. How has the level of biodiversity on our planet changed over time, and what's the trajectory into the future?
Well, Jay, I'm sorry to say that you, me, our dear definers, all other humans, we have not been so great for biodiversity. As humans have become the most dominant species on the planet, we've caused ecosystem-level change, which in turn has resulted in the relatively rapid loss of biodiversity across the globe. Many scientists today say that we are in a period of mass extinction, which is where 75% or more species are lost. There's been 5 such mass extinctions in the history of Earth, all due to natural reasons, asteroids, earthquakes, the usual stuff. The last one is when we lost the dinosaurs. This would be the first man-made one.
It's a tragic day, Scott, whenever you think back to the loss of the Breenosaurs. Okay. Why are some saying that we're in a mass extinction? Well, let's consider some data from the World Wildlife Fund's Living Planet Report, which is published every 2 years. The most recent Living Planet report, published in the fall of 2022, shockingly noted that on average there has been a 69% drop in monitored global vertebrate wildlife populations since 1970. The steepest drop has been in Latin America and the Caribbean, which the same study says has had its abundance of wildlife fall 94% since 1970.
That's absurd.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll try to top you, Jay. Here's another crazy stat. On a recent 60 Minutes piece on the extinction crisis, Stanford biologist Tony Barnosky said that the current rate of extinction is 100 times the normal rate over Earth's history. He said that we know the Earth's rate of extinction due to the fossil record, which he called rock solid. Mr. Barnosky, tip of the hat. Well done.
We need you on this show,
yeah.
Tony. Come on.
Do an advisor, something. That's really good. So he said that the rate of extinction today is 100 times more than the normal rate. And we've actually seen elsewhere, Jay, that the current extinction rate is 100 to 1,000 times what it was before 1800. So it's more than it should be. That's kind of bottom line.
Yeah. Any way you look at it, it's not good.
Yeah.
All right. The high level of extinction is set to continue, Scott, without significant action.
Mm-hmm.
In 2019, the United Nations Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, that is all one acronym, IPBES.
That's a good one to acronym. I don't really want to say that again.
Yes. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Thank you. The IPBES published an assessment of biodiversity changes in the past 50 years and confirmed potential scenarios for the future. A key statistic from the report is that around 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction, many within decades, more than ever before in human history. The good news, Scott, just keeps coming.
Yeah, but we promise we're going to get to what you can do and some of the solutions. It's coming.
Just hang in there, guys.
People are worried. I imagine you all listening have become worried. Well, in 2022, the World Economic Forum released the 17th edition of the Global Risks Report. It features insights from surveying 1,000 global experts and leaders. The 2022 version of this report ranks biodiversity loss as one of the top 3 most severe risks in the next 10 years. Crazy. Mm-hmm. All right, Jay, what are the key drivers of biodiversity loss? Why is this all happening at the rate that we've been talking about?
Right. The short answer, Scott, is that human consumption and other human activities harm Earth's ecosystems and play a significant role in the rapid changes in biodiversity. But let's break down the causes. We'll do that with the help of the United Nations IPBES report mentioned earlier. It ranked the top direct drivers of nature loss and impact. So let's dive on in. Scott, get us going.
Let's dive, Jay. So number 1, changes in land and sea use. The loss of and conversion of forests, wetlands, and other ecosystems for alternative uses, like agriculture, housing, or roads, is a leading cause of biodiversity loss. In fact, 75% of life on land has been severely altered due to human action. That's pretty crazy. These alterations have and will continue to worsen biodiversity loss. Jay, we're not going to be at a loss when we update that party fact guide with like party facts from every episode. This is...
I know.
Oh my God.
Ugh.
Okay, These changes to the land and sea are only going to accelerate as more people seek to live like the developed world. We're already consuming 175% of what the Earth can regenerate, and that's with half of humanity, about 4 billion people living on less than $10 a day.
That's wild.
All right, so that was 1, changes in land and sea use. Number 2 is exploitation of organisms. Direct exploitation of species could include activities like hunting or tree cutting, or it could involve the use of animals and plants for their positive benefits, like consuming them or using them to create medicines or within products. When exploited unsustainably, biodiversity and ecosystem stability is threatened. Overexploitation is often mentioned when talking about key and iconic species like the rhinoceroses, elephants, and sharks. Due to trophy hunting, poaching, and the cultural uses of these animals, many of them are close to extinction. The shark fin trade, for example, this is a really sad practice, has reduced some global shark populations by 90%. As a result, about 25% of all shark and ray species are in danger.
Here, Scott, is another astonishing statistic. It is estimated that in Africa, more than 11,000 rhinos have been poached since 2008 due to demand for their horns.
Ugh.
Because of this, populations of rhino have severely declined, and it is estimated that there are only about 29,000 rhinos in the wild. Scott, this stat sucks. It's sad, and it makes me think back to our safari experience this past summer. Guides and rangers that would take us out kind of tossed around this stat that said that rhinos, I don't know where it came from, but that within 8 years, rhinos could be extinct. And they're saying that as a way to, help everybody appreciate, what we were able to see in the park grounds. But it's still incredibly sad. And, we would drive around the terrain and see, armed cars patrolling, looking for poachers. Serious fences and everything too. But, it's still such a serious issue that, we see numbers like we just read. Yeah,
and you need that level of enforcement, unfortunately, Jay. And so you did see the rhino.
We did see the rhino, and it was kind of an evasive one that we didn't see for a long time. But, I mean, we had some pretty priceless pictures of Anna's face when we first saw him. It was pretty amazing. A baby rhino is just as cute as it gets. Oh. And actually, Scott, this is actually pretty interesting. So what this park had actually started to do, this Sabi Sands, I think a private game reserve, was they basically would go in and tranquilize rhinos, go in and shave off their horns, and then allow them, to wake back up and proceed, as normal. So, we saw all the rhinos we saw had their horns shaved, but it was kind of like, look, this is one proactive way we can take to minimize poaching. I'm sure there are others, but that was the one that we saw firsthand.
Yeah, interesting. Kind of take that what they're after out. Because kind of like the shark fins, they don't want the whole shark. They just wanted the fins. Here, they just want their horns.
Right. And I got to say the guys were good about driving this part home, but the trade around rhino horns doesn't make total sense because, people will use the horns and just grind them down and put them in drinks for different types of purposes.
Right.
But the makeup of the horns is the same as, hair and fingernails. It's just like keratin, I think the name is.
Yeah, right.
So very unfortunate, but alas, those are some of my personal rhino experiences, but we also encourage you to check out the Radiolab episode called, quote, The Rhino Hunter. It talks about Namibia's strategy to sell permits to shoot old male black rhinos that are likely going to harm other rhinos as a way to fund their conservation. It says in the episode, quote, since trophy hunting of the black rhino was legalized, that population has grown by 30%.
Of
course,
oh my God, 30%.
By can you believe it? Of course, not all conservationists like this approach. However, it's still an interesting episode and debate, and it's always fun to throw a stat like that out with a Valley Girl accent.
Exactly. All right, Jay, let's move on. So number 1 was changes in land and sea use. Number 2, exploitation of organisms. Number 3 now, climate change. Climate change has, of course, raised average global temperatures and has already begun to affect nature in many ways. Impacts on nature are likely to escalate due to increased negative climate events and changes to ecosystems. There's even research that suggests that climate change is having effects on many species by causing them to evolve more quickly. These genetic adaptations could affect natural evolutionary patterns and thus could affect the fates of some species.
Number 4 is pollution. Pollution can be particularly damaging to freshwater and marine habitats. Use of chemicals, runoff pollution, and waste, such as plastic pollution, has increased over time, affecting the species that call waters home.
Okay, so here's our 5th and final cause of this biodiversity loss: invasive species. Invasive species are organisms that have entered into an environment that is not their natural habitat. These species often have negative impacts on native animals and plants, which affects the natural balance of the ecosystem. Invasive species have contributed to 40% of all animal extinctions. One example of an invasive species causing extensive damage to ecosystems is the zebra mussel. These mussels attach themselves to boats, gaining a free ride to other ecosystems. I don't know why, but I'd imagine the zebra mussel just hanging on, wind blowing in its whatever its hair is. Anyway, once there, they outcompete the native species for space and food, and once established, they are very hard to remove. They reproduce rapidly and often eat all the microorganisms like plankton from the area. This causes the entire ecosystem to suffer. By taking the food from the other animals, these populations shrink and have an effect on the entire ecosystem. I feel like this is the case with too many invasive species. They grow so quickly and they outcompete what's there. Ugh, it's horrible. All right, so Jay, who is leading on this issue of biodiversity, trying to address it?
One notable organization that comes to mind on biodiversity is the International Non-Governmental Organization, or NGO, World Wildlife Fund, or WWF. It was founded in 1961 with the goal of protecting places and species affected by human development. WWF helps local communities across the planet conserve critical natural resources, advocate for more sustainable policies, and protect and restore species and habitats across the globe. The organization has an impressive record of accomplishment through its work in over 100 countries and is the world's largest conservation organization. Now, you've likely seen the iconic WWF panda logo at some point, which, fun fact, was created in 1961 and based on a real-life endangered panda, Chi-Chi, housed at the London Zoo starting in 1958. At the time, Chi-Chi was the only panda that lived in the Western world.
Interesting. Okay. And then there's also Conservation International, another international NGO. It's committed to protecting nature in all its forms for the benefit of everyone on Earth. They have been around since 1987 and have worked to protect nature in more than 70 countries. Much of their work lately has involved climate change, protecting the oceans, and promoting what they call planet-positive economies. With the help of partner organizations, Conservation International reported their work has supported the conservation of a little more than 200 million acres of land.
Next up, we've got the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation. It was created in 1993 by the American Museum of Natural History, found in New York City. This organization was created to contribute scientific and educational resources for the public. The center works at the local, regional, and international level to not only research and educate on the conservation of biological and cultural diversity, but also to apply the knowledge in the field through actionable conservation solutions through partnership and collaboration. The work and research of the center has spurred global conservation actions. Their findings, for example, led to the creation of a grizzly bear sanctuary on the Pacific coast and helped Vietnam create its first natural primate conservation action plan. Cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jay, so these are just a few examples of organizations in this area. There are many more doing work to protect biodiversity. To do their jobs effectively, however, there is one thing that's a common thread here. They're going to need money. $154 billion is spent each year on actions to protect and manage nature. It's a lot, but you'll see it's not enough. Most of this money is spent by governments across the globe. Only about 17% on current spending on nature comes from the private sector. The UN reports that more financial investment is needed to make an impact globally. The organization estimates that we need to double our current investments to $348 billion each year by 2025 to reform industries and make the impact that is needed on climate change, nature, and ecosystem loss. We also saw an estimate of needing $700 billion a year. Regardless, we're going to need a lot of money and a lot more than we currently spend.
Yeah, we can go to bed tonight knowing that the number is large.
Yes. All right, so Jay, we're going to need some money. We're going to need to act here. So what are notable policies or commitments around this issue that can help move the needle in a positive direction?
All right, so while many definers may be familiar with the term COP or COP, which stands for Conference of Parties, as it relates to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, there is another conference of the parties associated with the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD. This COP is an every other year meeting of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. This CBD is the international legal instrument for the conservation of biological diversity, the sustainable use of its components, and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. It has been ratified by 196 nations.
That's a lot, Jay. So it must be like all the big countries, right?
You would think, wouldn't you?
Well, Jay, the United States, sometimes we're just befuddling, aren't we?
Yeah.
In what we do. Well, we're not among the 196 nations. We haven't ratified it. The only other holdout is the Vatican. I don't know why that is. But the U.S. ratifying it would require 2/3 of the Senate to approve it. And there hasn't been enough Republicans to ratify it since the early 1990s when the CBD was drafted with the input from the United States. So some argue that the lack of ratification deprioritizes the issue for the United States and means less support is being provided to other countries on their conservation strategies.
Critics of the CBD point out that it set targets in 2010 for 2020 that were not met. Still, among other achievements, CBD has pushed countries to create national biodiversity strategies and to expand their networks of protected areas. Just a couple months ago, new goals were set at the 15th meeting of the COP on Biological Diversity, or COP15, as the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was negotiated. This landmark framework includes 4 overarching goals and 23 action-based targets with the goal of protecting life on Earth. This framework aims to achieve the set targets by 2025 to set the stage for further action by 2030.
Okay, so one target of note within the framework is the 30 by 30 pledge. It says that countries aligned to the framework will work to protect 30% of both land and water by 2030. This may sound super ambitious, and it is, but already 17% of the land across the planet is considered to be protected. So we're in a decent spot, but we gotta pick this up. Importantly, protecting the land doesn't mean that it can't be used. It just means there are restrictions in place, so the land is used in a sustainable way. Now, notably, this has proven popular, this 30 by 30 thing, and not the sports documentaries. 100 countries have signed up for this pledge before COP15 even started. So there's a lot of support for it.
Right, but yeah, kind of, Scott, back to what you were saying about our home country here. U.S. has not ratified CBD. However, The U.S. is aligned with this pledge given its initiative called America the Beautiful. This pledge aims to conserve 30% of U.S. land and water by 2030. Currently, 12% of American land is permanently protected, so there will need to be a lot of effort in the next few years to make this 30% pledge a reality here in the States. So, will protecting land like this truly help biodiversity? The 60 Minutes piece we mentioned highlighted the work of the Mexican ecologist Gerardo Ceballos.
Oh, you can do better than that, Jay.
Gerardo Ceballos.
There we go. Okay.
Shows the power of conserving land. He's created a 3,000 square mile biosphere in Guatemala by paying family farmers more to stop cutting the forests than they would get from farming it. So, with money from wealthy donors, he pays each family $1,000 a year, which is $2,000 per square mile. He's seen some impressive results. The jaguar was nearly extinct in Mexico, and now there are 600 in the reserve.
But you shouldn't walk around at night in the reserve by yourself.
Right. Rule number 2.
So we'll see how things play out with the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, meaning its targets require very quickly reforming, among other things, agriculture, forestry, and fishing in major ways. This isn't legally binding, so it's more of like a name and shame thing if you're not doing the 30 by 30 thing or making progress toward all these other targets that you've said you've been committed to. So we'll see. And as with climate change, there's also the issue of how much developed countries are going to pay developing countries to help them with this issue.
All right, so the CBD is on a large international scale, while of course there's smaller scale work and successes to explore as well. We found a nice UN Environment Program article from May 2022 titled, "Here's How 5 Countries Are Reviving Biodiversity." One example they talk about is greening farms in Zambia. Agroforestry systems, which combine crops with trees, support biodiversity. Now, hundreds of small farmers in Zambia's Copperbelt province are receiving training and tools in return for letting indigenous trees grow on their land. The We Forest project provides families with better and more diversified livelihoods, such as beekeeping, which cuts their dependence on the charcoal business, degrading local Miombo woodlands. Okay, Scott, let's start getting a little proactive here. Let's put the power in the definers' hands. What can definers do to improve biodiversity?
All right, so the first is make efforts to protect and conserve natural areas by respecting local habitats and participating in habitat restoration and other conservation actions. This includes setting up your own pollinator garden. For more on pollinators, check out episode 53.
A lot of good shout-outs here, Scott.
Yes, we love that. And another thing you all can do is work to improve environmental policies at all levels. While we mentioned earlier some of the large-scale organizations that are doing biodiversity and conservation work, there are likely local and more grassroots organizations near you that could use your support. If your local government doesn't have a biodiversity strategy and action plan, that is something you could push to be developed. You could also ask your local government to do like New York City did and adopt a native plant law. This law promotes biodiversity through mandating the use of native plants in public landscapes.
Definers, you can also plant and support plants native to your area. Since they're native, they are naturally destined to thrive there and will require less water, fertilizer, and pesticides than other plants. These plants also support the local wildlife and habitats that are native to your location, strengthening the local landscapes. You can also reduce the use of pesticides, fertilizers, and other chemicals used in lawn care and at home. This will prevent them from entering the ecosystem and causing harm.
Lastly, we suggest understanding the products you're consuming and using and the practices used to produce them. Products that are FSC, Forestry Stewardship Council, Regenerative Organic Certified, or Rainforest Alliance Certified can help give some credibility to how the products were sourced in a more sustainable manner. So that's it, Jay. We said that people could make efforts to protect and conserve natural areas, work to improve environmental policies, plant and support native plants in your area, and understand the products you consume.
That's right, Scott. And I do want to jump in with just one more shout out, folks.
Oh.
For the plant and support plants native to your area piece that I just mentioned, check out episode 60 on sustainable landscaping. We got you covered.
Oh, nice. I forgot about that one. All right. So let's move into our expert guest here. Let's set this one up. So Paula Ehrlich is the president and CEO of the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. In this position, she oversees the foundation's broad activities to foster a knowing stewardship of our world through biodiversity research and education initiatives that promote and inform worldwide protection of biodiversity.
Paula is in charge of the Foundation's signature initiative, the Half Earth Project. This project seeks to conserve half the Earth and protect 85% or more of species, including ourselves. How nice. Mm-hmm. The Half Earth Project builds on E.O. Wilson's book, Half Earth, Our Planet's Fight for Life. E.O. Wilson was a Harvard professor and a pioneer in spearheading efforts to preserve and protect the biodiversity of Earth. Dr. Ehrlich has more than 30 years of strategic scientific management and research expertise and diverse academic, nonprofit, and corporate leadership experience. Let's see what she's got to say.
Let's do it.
Would you like to shape the future of clean energy and advance your career? The Financing and Deploying Clean Energy program at Yale can help you get there. This online certificate program trains and connects rising leaders to catalyze an equitable transition to a clean economy. Join the next cohort to grow your professional network and deepen your impact. Learn more and apply by March 12th, 2023 by visiting cbey.yale.edu/certificate. That's cbey.yale.edu/certificate. All right, Definers, welcome to the interview portion of our episode on biodiversity. Today, Scott and I are super excited to be joined by Paula Ehrlich, the president and CEO of the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. So first off, Paula, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to join you today. It's really nice to speak with you both.
All right. So let's start things off with a little bit of your background, Paula. We see that you got your BS in zoology from Duke University. So have to ask, is that where your interest in the diversity of life really started?
It probably started before that. I've always been a keen adventurer, explorer, and an avid hiker. And I was interested in studying the living world and understanding how things work. The namesake of our foundation, E.O. Wilson, his sense always was that if everyone, especially young students, participates in the discovery and experiences the honor and privilege of creating and improving our understanding of the world, that it would be a transcendent moment for ourselves and our planet. And as I began to explore my bachelor's in zoology, I think that's where I was too, just imagining I might be able to make a difference in the world.
And Paula, we have to ask, having gotten a BS in zoology, as Scott, you might see is coming, what's your favorite animal?
You stumped her.
That's a tricky one. There's so many wonderful ways that animals are in our lives, right? I spent a tremendous amount of my career working with horses. And horses are lovely, not just because they're grand animals, but they also bring you out into nature and connect you in a way with life every day. So I guess I'd have to pick horses.
Wow, I think you just made a friend of my girlfriend with that answer. So well done.
And we don't, of course, want to overlook your dog who wanted to try to get into the Zoom just a few minutes ago. And I know Delta is comfortable on Scott's lap as we speak.
Oh yes, she's riveted.
But I do
sleeping, one or the other. So
yeah, that's why I hesitated. I didn't really want to hurt his feelings.
And Jay, I thought when you said you have to ask, I thought you were going to ask about Paula's PhD in, of all things, bone physiology. So I don't really know exactly what that is. So can you tell us, does that still come up in your work? What is that? Why did you decide to pursue that?
Well, PhDs, no matter the topic, teach us how to think. And I was focused, maybe passionate even, about doing research that might help us understand a problem in a new way. and potentially solving a problem. So that's why I pursued my PhD. And that sort of curiosity and the research that comes with it is really core to our work at the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. It's what helps us to reimagine the way that we care for our planet.
All right, well, Jay, but I think we might have to start with Dr. Ehrlich. I feel like we jumped to Paula maybe too soon there.
That's right. Yes.
Given the PhD. So Dr. Ehrlich, what led you to go from the Drug Discovery Center for Innovation to the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation in 2012?
The opportunity to use my accumulated experience and expertise to bring the hopes of the greatest naturalist of our time, E.O. Wilson, to life. Always been driven by challenge and a desire to make a difference in the world. And it was an extraordinary opportunity and a privilege to be able to work with him to do so.
And Paula/Dr. Ehrlich, we know that unfortunately E.O. Wilson passed away in 2021, and we are sure that you had a chance to engage with him quite a bit prior to his passing. But for those unfamiliar with E.O. Wilson, is there anything you want to make sure our definers know about him or of your time with him?
Well, E.O. Wilson, Ed, was the core of my organization and my best friend.
Wow.
He was a humble, gentle human with a giant intellect and an equally giant heart. He was a constant source of inspiration and courage. And his gift, embodied in the work of the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation, was really a deep belief in people and our shared human resolve to save the natural world. Both formally and informally, Ed inspired students of life. He constantly reminded and encouraged us that we can make a difference in the world, and with that gift that we would do something absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about a biodiversity initiative and the variety of life that you're saying it's rooted in a belief in people, in humans.
Yeah.
And I guess just to go a bit further into the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. So its mission, right, is to reimagine the way we care for our planet. And we're going to get to your signature project, the Half-Earth Project, for sure in a minute. But are there any other activities of the foundation that you all do to serve that mission that you want to make sure our listeners, our definers as we call them, hear about?
Today, the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation plays a strong leadership role to convene voices, deepen scientific insights, and inspire action to transform the way that we care for nature, people, and the planet that we share. We're doing that in three ways. First, by leading and supporting innovative, cutting-edge science. Second, by prioritizing species to ensure ecologically representative biodiversity conservation outcomes. And third, by connecting and empowering community insights. A lot of that manifests through the programs and activities of the Half-Earth Project. But under all that is a curiosity and passion for discovery, a sort of drumbeat plea around the need for broader research to better understand the species of our planet, and then a moral conviction that in order to succeed, we really must inspire informed collective action to ensure that we leave no species behind.
I love that, Paula, and I think that's a fantastic transition point into the next topic we'd like to discuss with you, which is the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation's Half-Earth Project. So E.O. Wilson said, quote, "The Half-Earth proposal offers a solution commensurate with the magnitude of the problem. Only by setting aside half the planet in reserve or more can we save the living part of the environment and achieve the stabilization required for our own survival." So in the introduction leading up to our conversation with you, we talked about the 30 by 30 goal to protect 30% of the world's lands and waters by 2030. So question to you is, would you argue, in line with E.O. Wilson, that 30% isn't quite ambitious enough and we should ratchet it up to 50%?
The 30 by 30 milestone commitments are grounded in the moonshot goal and the solution of Half-Earth. The science of Half-Earth predicts as a principle that if we protect half the Earth, will save sufficient habitat to be able to safeguard the bulk of biodiversity. Mm-hmm. That's because, as you might expect, as the size of conservation areas grow, the diversity of life also grows in a mathematically predictable way. So if we achieve half Earth, we can solve the extinction crisis. The key is to remember that not all places are equally effective at protecting biodiversity. So the Half Earth Project's been doing research that guides exploration and discovery, mapping the species of our planet and working to really democratize that information so that everyone everywhere can see in a whole new way where we have the best opportunity to protect the most species. As countries around the world set conservation targets like 30 by 30, we're generating information to help guide which 30 and to share that information and provide scientific insight that can inform conservation outcomes.
Okay, so it sounds like you see 30 by 30 as one step towards reaching the moonshot goal, and that you are actively involved in helping countries figure out how to do that. You also mentioned this mapping, and I think you're referring to the Half Earth Map. By 2023, the Half Earth Map, it can do things like identify, rank, and recommend priority areas for conservation based on the latest, carefully developed, and comprehensive species-level information for animals and planets worldwide. I wanted to make sure to get that right, so I wanted to read that. Is that right? Can you tell us more about this map? Who's going to use it? Is it going to keep being updated?
Sure. If the goal is to protect the web of life for all of life to sustainably endure, then where we pick to prioritize for conservation becomes particularly important. This is because not all places are equally effective at protecting biodiversity. Each species has its own important place in the world that we have to keep in mind. And in order to achieve our targets for conservation, we need a way to measure our success. One of the first things that people asked us when we began to talk about Half Earth was which half. And so we did begin to develop the Half Earth Project map. And our hope was that the science of the Half Earth Project map would transform our understanding of the world and what we needed to do to take care of it. That the map democratizes that information, gives everyone the power, the information they need to know what to do where to design the optimum network for protection of biodiversity globally and to dynamically inform action as both our knowledge and conservation efforts progress. So yes, the intention is that it would be accessible to everyone and updated so it's relevant to helping support decision making. These mutually inspiring goals for habitat protection, like 30 by 30 and Half Earth, of course, galvanize our efforts, but it's inclusion of metrics, indicators that allow us to measure biodiversity conservation outcomes in these places that are sort of the holy grail. That's how we ensure that species are fully protected within the conservation targets we wish to achieve. And so where we haven't achieved conservation targets in the past, it may be because we haven't had a way to measure our success. So we've developed indicators such as the Species Protection Index, the SPI. So we have a way to measure our success. These act like a FICA score for biodiversity. And right now you can go on the Half Earth Project map and see an SPI national report card for the protected places of every nation. You can get an SPI score from 0 to 100, depending upon how many species groups are protected in your country and how they contribute globally to overall species protection. And that makes a difference, right? So, for example, both Paraguay and Ghana have the same number of species, and they've protected 13% of their countries. But Paraguay has an SPI of 45 and Ghana has an SPI of 79. So by using this kind of information, you can see how well you're doing in protecting the species of your place as it contributes to overall species protection. And what's really cool about the Half Earth Project map is it also shows where to go next in order to increase your score, with a possible configuration of additional areas that should be priorities for protection in order to best protect the species of your country as they uniquely contribute to global biodiversity conservation. We call those places for a half-Earth future. And our ambition in creating that sort of information is to share the sort of information that will allow people to act. Our ambition is first to deliver actionable scientific contributions and evidence that supports communities in their understanding and stewardship of biodiversity. But then second, to create the foundation for an inclusive and really best possible forum for connecting and empowering community insights to ensure truly successful conservation outcomes. So really bringing communities also into the map with the unique insight that they have about their place, their home.
No, so it's interesting you mention that targets were missed in the past, and that was something we brought up in the introduction. But it's a fair point that maybe it was a lack of metrics and a lack of where to go next. So it's great that you've provided those tools. And so if our listeners want to check out the Half-Earth Map, they can go on your website right now and poke around. Is that right?
Absolutely. Just go to halfearthproject.org and there are links to the maps, all different kinds of layers that you can explore there, including ways, as we've discussed, of how we can measure our success and really help us understand and come together to really inform what we need to do in the places that are most important to us and that are most important for species.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we went over the Half-Earth Map and some of the community work you're doing. Is there anything else with the Half-Earth Project? I love the Paraguay and Ghana example. Are there any other examples like that you want to make sure the listeners hear?
Well, one of the things I would love to talk about is Half-Earth Day.
Yes, we saw that. I didn't know that existed. Please tell us more.
When people first hear about the Half-Earth Project, at least 10 years ago now, they imagined, a world that was divided by a piece of barbed wire where people are on one half and nature's on the other, and that's never been the intention. As we began to talk about Half-Earth and the extraordinary way that we could solve the extinction crisis through this sort of moonshot goal, Half-Earth Day was envisioned as a way to really help people imagine what Half-Earth could look like, to empower an individual and community insight, and to establish the mind and spirit of a movement culture that would ensure truly successful conservation outcomes. So each year, Half-Earth Day takes on a different shape, inspired by the cultural moment. Right now, you can go onto the Half-Earth Project website and view Half-Earth Day sessions from previous Half-Earth Days in Washington, D.C., New York City, Berkeley, and London. Each of which focused on something that was relevant for that local community, as well as the cultural moment worldwide. This year, we haven't yet cited the Half-Earth Day location for 2023, but Half-Earth Day generally falls halfway between Earth Day and Earth Day on or around October 22nd. Mm-hmm. And we have a few candidate cities and hope to decide by the end of the month. The format's varied from year to year, but if you can't join us in person, often key sessions are live streamed or recorded sessions are available on our website shortly following Half-Earth Day.
Fantastic. And Paula, folks can find that just on the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Initiative website, I presume.
That's right. So there's the E.O. Wilson Foundation website, as well as the Half-Earth Project website, both of which can take you to information about Half-Earth Day.
Fantastic.
When we did the introduction, Paul, I have to say that it's heavy stuff. Like we talked about how climate change, we said in the short term can create a lot of havoc, but in the long term, biodiversity really threatens our viability as a species, which is a lot to take in. Can you tell us, what gives you hope in making meaningful progress in all these indicators you're measuring and reaching the moonshot of the Half Earth Project and things like that?
What gives me hope is really people. Our work embodies the hopes of the greatest naturalist of our time, E.O. Wilson, and he's a constant source of inspiration and courage. I'm also very excited about the tremendous energy that was gathered at COP15 in Montreal this year. Extraordinary people who are carrying forward this same spirit through their work and coming together, science and indigenous peoples, business and philanthropy, to really reimagine the way that we understand and care for our planet. E.O. Wilson called Half Earth a moonshot because it's meant to inspire us in the same way. He hoped to move the conservation movement from a process, which has been somewhat successful, to a goal. And if you look at history, having a goal is a big deal. It's not just important conceptually, it's important inspirationally. It's moonshot ambitions that drive humanity. They allow our collective imagination to explode, to lean in and do something extraordinary.
And stay focused, right?
Yeah, and it's an interesting time for us to be reaching for a moonshot because we also know a lot more about how to prioritize places for conservation than we ever have before. We have a lot more big data and geospatial information available to drive success. I'm hopeful because we have a solution at our fingertips.
So in the introduction, we went over some basic things that definers can do to help enhance biodiversity. Things like planting a pollinator garden, advocating for helpful environmental policies, planting native plants, considering how the products they buy were made in the first place. Any other words of advice for our definers that care about this issue and want to make that difference?
I'd say pay attention. Know that in this moment, we will increasingly expand our understanding of the world, the way things are connected and work together to support our lives and the interconnected web of life that we're part of. There'll be increasing ways that we can connect that scientific information to action, both in places that are important to you locally and for species and places for which you feel a special connection. If you're interested in learning more and being part of the Half Earth Project community, I'd encourage you to go onto our website and sign the Half Earth Pledge. The pledge provides some specific ways that you can begin to devote your time and energy as it's relevant to in many of the ways you've listed here, while at the same time allowing us to begin to continue to communicate with you about what we have going on and events that may be happening in your area and ways that we can connect and help to inform. But I would say pay attention, live, work, and study in a way that supports a half-Earth future, and share that story with us, your friends, your family, in support of a real movement culture that embraces caring for our planet and supports a sustainable future.
I like this idea of paying attention, and the pledge I think is great. I'm glad that you mentioned it. It kind of reminds me of, I remember reading this article that was talking about some research that some professor was doing, I think it was in Europe, where one measure of biodiversity, or the number of life that was still around, was that he literally looked at the amount of bugs that I guess were killed on the windshield. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you saw this, Paula, but they were saying that it's declined quite a bit since they started measuring that. Like, I think they would just go around and see how many were on there. And then I thought about it, and I was thinking, yeah, I feel like road trips in the past, there would be a lot more of that. And I just didn't really pay attention to that. Mm-hmm. And I know that's very anecdotal and whatnot, but just when you mentioned paying attention, it brought that back to my memory.
No, absolutely. It's stories like that that help people realize how different how different things are today than perhaps when we were younger. Extinction usually unfolds off stage, right? So when species go extinct, we don't really notice, except that when something like that's a part of our everyday life begins to change. Those squeegees that are at the gas station are there because people needed them to clean squash bugs off of their windshield. I don't think that many people need to to do that anymore, at least not every day. And that's the gobsmacking way that we realize that even if you're not a scientist working on that every day, that those species are going extinct or declining in number.
Right.
And it's those kinds of stories that really help people to understand and become engaged with what's happening around us that we may just not know about. In 2019, the UN report warned that 1 million animal and plant species were threatened with extinction. And so those huge numbers made a big splash because they were kind of a surprise. But it allows you to pay attention because probably somewhere within you recognize that those creatures and are touched by the fact that we're losing them as a part of our lives, and imagine maybe even a moral conviction to act to protect them. But the other reason it really matters is because those insects are the little things that run our world. They don't really exist in isolation. When we lose key components of ecosystems, we lose fragments of the intricate web of life that sustains nature and sustains us as part of nature. Those organisms that surround us have evolved over 3.8 billion years to create an exquisite and careful balance of interconnected resilience. So as they disappear, they have it may have an unknown effect on our lives, and certainly on the rest of the web of life to which they are connected, that inevitably support and sustain our enduring livelihoods. So those sorts of stories really help to create a shift in consciousness, and critically important that we come to know and understand that web of life is so important to us because we're part of it, and that with ongoing species and ecosystem loss, sooner or later our strand of that web may be cut as well.
Yeah, no, it's with climate change and biodiversity, I feel like the impacts are not in your face, but the more you realize and read things, the more you pay attention, the scarier it can become, and the more the light bulb shines in your head of like, this is a big deal. So we have our traditional last question. I just want to ask one more thing, Paula. Are there any other specific examples or specific stories that you want to share with the definers that you feel like illuminates the problem and the opportunity with biodiversity?
One of my very favorite stories is about the northern white rhino. They're going extinct in real time. This is an example of an extinction event that's happening right before us. The last two northern white rhinos are a mother and daughter named Najin and Fatu. And the last male northern white rhino died in 2018, making the species functionally extinct. There was an author, Sam Anderson, that wrote about these two last northern white rhinos, mother and daughter, that he wrote about in the New York Times. And he said, a rhino is not just a rhino. It's a load-bearing strand in an elaborate ecological web. A rhino is not just part of the world. It is a world. It mows and plows fields. Its dung feeds colonies of insects, and birds come to feed on the insects, and other predators come to watch the birds or to catch the birds. And it's an ecosystem of its own, and it's an ecosystem we're staring in the eye. The worrying, even bigger tragedy is the unknown extinction events that are occurring in ecosystems of species we don't know or even really fully understand. And for us, the full and comprehensive understanding of all the species of our planet become really important as you think about the connections told just through this tragic story of the northern white rhino, that these ecosystems are intra-supportive in such an extraordinary way. And until we fully understand all the species of our planet and how they're interconnected, we risk losing species inadvertently without even knowing. So the focus of our organization on really understanding and comprehensively knowing all 10 million species of our planet is critically important to our future ability to sustainably support the biodiversity of our planet.
Fantastic, Paula, and I think a very sobering story that you shared, and I'm sure will resonate with our listeners as well. As Scott alluded to, we are stat junkies here on the show, and so we like to ask you our traditional last interview question, which is our party fact question. So let's say we're at some kind of get-together, whether it's in relation to Half Earth Day or perhaps in a friend's backyard with a pollinator-friendly garden, whatever it is that is encouraging biodiversity. And let's say our definer is there and wants to share some specific statistic with their friends about how important biodiversity is. And of course, not all parties, can be jovial all the time. So if it's a sobering stat, that's okay too. But is there one stat that you would suggest our definers arm themselves with to help convey how important biodiversity is?
Well, I know that most of us have been extraordinarily concerned with climate change. And as we've come to understand what we need to do, we probably have that solution in sight. We know what things we need to do to change our behavior, policies, lifestyles in order to solve that problem. We just need the will. The tricky thing with biodiversity is once it's gone forever. And so there's an urgency there. Statistically, we know about 2 million of the species of our planet right now, but they're estimated to be 10 million. And so we're in a bit in the dark. We only know 20% of the players on the field. And we don't have the luxury of time. If we lose those species, once species are gone, they're gone forever. We need to know everything we can about the species, known and unknown, in order to best solve this problem. And we need to act with urgency and humility until we learn more in ensuring that we care for the species of our planet.
And so driving that home, Paul, I think you'd mentioned that effectively we're only aware of 20% of the species on our planet. Is that right?
That's right.
And I think what makes that much more compelling is to your earlier comment that a lot of these extinction events happen, I think, as you said, off stage, which speaks to how significant this issue is that we're perhaps not even understanding, but hopefully can lean on tools like the Half Earth math to help us do just that.
Right now, the extinction rate's currently 1,000 times higher than at any time in human history. That means that half our planet's species may be gone by the end of the century. And if we lose those species, we lose the ecosystems, the intricate web of life that sustains nature and sustains us as part of nature. It's like a game of Jenga, right? You're never exactly sure which piece, when you pull it out, will cause the whole to collapse.
Yeah, we went over that because there was a big Jenga at COP, right?
I didn't hear that. That's great. So here's the tricky thing. The game of Jenga is played with 54 wooden blocks. And our planet is made up of something more like 10 million species, and we only know and have a name for 2 million of them.
That's a really tall tower, Paula.
Yeah, even if we try to be strategically smart about which ones it might be okay to lose, we know only about 20% of the players on the field and very little about their connections with the 8 million others that are unknown. So you might say we're playing a little in the dark in our attempts to care for our planet. E.O. Wilson said, unless humanity learns a great deal more about global biodiversity and moves quickly to protect it, we will soon lose most of the species composing life on Earth. And he also said that we, humanity, are passing through a bottleneck. And at the other end, if we pass through safely and take most of Earth's life forms with us, human existence could be a paradise compared to today. So number one, to get to paradise, we need to not just know what we're losing, we must know what species we have. And number two, we need to understand where we have the best opportunity to protect the most species. And that's what the Half Earth Project is about.
Well, Paula, thank you so much for talking with us. Very well-spoken person. I appreciate also the optimism that was infused in what you spoke of.
Thank you, Scott. That's very kind.
No,
as I said, I've had the privilege to work with the most extraordinary naturalist of our time, E.O. Wilson. And probably one of the most powerful things is the way he was able to convene people through his writing. And to the extent that I can continue to embody that and do that well and continue to carry that spirit forward, I think it's really valuable to our conservation community. It makes me really proud of that relationship and its ongoing life, if you will, within all of the work of everyone that's working so diligently now to care for our planet.
Yes, you most definitely are successfully carrying on E.O. Wilson's legacy. We appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for all you're doing. I'm glad the listeners now know about it.
I am too, and I welcome them and you and your community to join us online with the Half Earth Pledge at Half Earth Day, and in any other ways that we can be an authentic part of your community and support you. We're here.
Thank you, Dr. Ehrlich.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Scott, from where I record our podcast episodes, there's a little window that looks into my backyard, and I swear I just saw a Breenosaurus walk down the street. So I got a jet, go see if I can discover a new species, but let's just quickly wrap this up, shall we?
They're very elusive, Jay, so good luck.
I got to rush. Thank you. All right, so we would like to thank, per usual, Square Peg, Round Hole, and Potions for the music we use in the episode. We would also like to thank our incomparable audio editor, Keaton Butler, for all of the magic she does behind the scenes. And Scott, there is one new person to thank this episode. Who might that be?
I think we're going to be thanking her a lot. Her name is Taylor Price. She's the newest member of our team. So Taylor is the Senior Manager for Global Sustainability at Aptar, where she works to support sustainability in all areas. Within this role, she focuses on sustainability communication, engaging stakeholders on sustainability and ESG, environmental, social, and governance topics, and helps set company strategy. When she's not saving the world at her 9-to-5, she is listening to the podcasts, which I think is part of how she found us, Jay, eating at local restaurants, or drinking a latte. I wonder what kind of latte. Mm-hmm. She is also not so secretly obsessed with sea turtles. Taylor received, because now we all know. Taylor received her BA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and her Master of Environmental Management degree from Duke University. She must love North Carolina, and she's got a lot of college basketball to watch. I don't know who she roots for when they play each other. We'll have to ask her.
That's a phenomenal question.
All right, Jay. I think that about does it. You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen.
And I'm Jay Siegel. We will see you next time.